My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 38 years old. If you'd driven past my house last spring, you would have thought my life was settled, comfortable, safe, the kind of life people quietly envy without admitting it. A neat two-story home in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, a gray sedan that always started on the first try, automatic bill payments, clean credit, no chaos spilling out onto the lawn. From the outside, I looked like someone who had figured things out. I believed it too, for a long time. I worked as an operations manager for a logistics company. Nothing glamorous, but reliable. The kind of job where problems don't explode, they get absorbed. Where systems run smoothly because someone notices the cracks before they widen. That someone was me. I was the person who made sure things didn't fall apart. Ryan used to say that's what he loved about me. Ryan Mitchell, my partner of 9 years. We met in our late 20s, when ambition still felt exciting instead of exhausting. He was charm and momentum, always talking about the next deal, the next opportunity, the next version of his life where everything finally clicked. I was the one who kept track of reality while he chased possibility. Together, we looked balanced. People said we were solid. They meant predictable. They meant safe. I didn't mind. Someone had to be the steady one. We bought our house 4 years ago. Well, bought is generous. I handled the mortgage paperwork, the inspections, the insurance comparisons. Ryan picked paint colors and talked about backyard barbecues. From the outside, it probably looked like teamwork. Inside, it was already tilting. The truth is, nothing in my life fell apart all at once. There were no screaming matches, no slammed doors, no obvious betrayal you could point to and say, that's where it broke. What happened to me was quieter than that, slower, more dangerous, because you don't brace for what you don't see coming. The night everything changed started like any other gathering. Friends over, drinks poured, laughter bouncing off walls we'd built together. I was in my own kitchen, doing what I always did, making sure everything ran smoothly, when I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. I didn't walk in on it. I didn't confront it. I just stood there, frozen, listening as the man I'd built my life around explained to someone else why I wasn't enough. Not angry, not cruel, just finished. If you've ever been called the responsible one, like it was a flaw, stay with me. And if you've ever held everything together for someone who quietly resented you for it, tell me in the comments. Because this story doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with being invisible in your own life. Before that night, I would have told you Ryan and I were a team. Not a flashy one. Not the kind that posted anniversary captions every year or made grand gestures in public. We were quieter than that. Practical. Functional. The kind of couple people described as low drama, which I used to think was a compliment. We met when we were both still figuring things out. Ryan had big ideas and restless energy. I had structure. I liked plans. I liked knowing where the ground was before I stepped. He used to say I made him feel anchored, like no matter how wild his week got, there was always somewhere solid to land. I didn't realize at the time how much of that weight I was carrying alone. Over the years, my role settled into something familiar. I handled the bills, I tracked expenses, I smoothed things over when money was tight and his commissions dipped. I remembered birthdays, family obligations, doctor appointments, insurance renewals. I was the person who noticed when the fridge was empty and when the bank balance needed adjusting. Ryan noticed too. He just didn't value it the way I thought he did. At gatherings, he'd introduce me with a laugh. "This is Emily," he'd say. "She's the responsible one." People would smile. Some would nod approvingly. And I would smile too. Because what else do you do when someone turns you into a label in front of a room full of people? At first, it felt harmless, almost affectionate, but over time, that phrase started to carry weight. Responsible didn't mean capable. It didn't mean strong. It meant predictable.
It meant safe. It meant boring. I told myself I was being sensitive. When Ryan talked about his friends, guys who'd flipped houses faster, climbed corporate ladders quicker, taken bigger risks, I listened. I encouraged him. I reassured him when things didn't pan out the way he hoped. I reminded him that success wasn't a race, that stability wasn't failure. I didn't realize those words were landing like accusations instead of comfort. Looking back now, I can see the moments where I shrank without noticing, the times I stopped sharing my own wins because they made him quiet, the times I softened my excitement so it wouldn't sound like pressure. I learned how to be proud in private and supportive in public. That's what love looks like, I told myself. Compromise, adjustment, understanding. But there's a difference between compromise and erasure. We built a life that ran smoothly because I made it run. Our house stayed organized, our finances stayed clean, our calendar stayed manageable. Ryan lived in the version of adulthood where things just worked, and I was the reason they did. No one applauds that kind of work. They only notice when it stops. The night of the gathering, I moved through the house like I always did, refilling drinks, checking on guests, making sure conversations didn't stall. I wasn't trying to be impressive. I was just being myself, the version of me that knew how to keep things comfortable for everyone else. I didn't feel resentful then. I felt useful. That's the part that hurts the most when I think back on it. I wasn't unhappy. I wasn't plotting an exit. I wasn't waiting for a reason to leave. I still believed in us, in what we'd built, in the future we talked about in vague, careful terms. I thought stability was something we shared. Standing in that kitchen later, listening to Ryan's voice carry through the archway, I realized how alone I'd been in that belief. When he described me, he didn't mention loyalty or consistency or the fact that his life stayed upright because someone was holding the frame. He talked about me like I was background noise, a function, a setting he'd outgrown. And suddenly, every small moment rewrote itself. Every joke I laughed off, every comparison I ignored, every time I told myself love wasn't supposed to feel exciting all the time. I understood in a way that settled deep in my chest that I had been loving him with my whole body while he was already stepping away in his mind. I wasn't heartbroken yet. I was grieving something quieter. The realization that I had given my steadiness, my patience, my emotional labor to someone who saw those things as evidence that I didn't challenge him enough, that I wasn't a partner, I was a convenience. And that understanding, that slow, heavy truth, was the moment I stopped feeling safe inside the life I'd built.
Anger didn't hit me like an explosion. It arrived the way a fever does. Quiet at first, then suddenly undeniable. I stood in that kitchen longer than I should have, one hand resting against the counter, the other holding nothing at all. The room smelled like roasted vegetables and bourbon, the kind of ordinary comfort that had always meant home to me, my home. And yet I felt like a guest who had wandered into a private conversation she was never meant to hear. Ryan's voice drifted through the archway again, calm, casual, almost bored. "I don't know," he said. "I just feel stuck." Stuck. The words scraped across my chest like something sharp dragged slowly. He wasn't whispering, he wasn't lowering his voice. There was no urgency in him, no fear that I might overhear. He sounded comfortable saying it, practiced even, like this wasn't the first time he'd explained this version of me to someone else. Someone laughed at the table, a low, sympathetic sound. "She's great," Ryan went on, and my heart jumped at the word great. Until he finished the sentence. "She's reliable, she's predictable, everything with her is planned. Sometimes it feels like I'm living with a really efficient system instead of a partner." Efficient system. My stomach twisted. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That wasn't a bad joke. That was how he saw me. I wanted to walk into the dining room right then. I imagined it clearly, setting the ice bucket down, meeting his eyes, asking him to repeat every word.
asking him if this was how he talked about the woman who paid half the mortgage and all the emotional bills, the woman who stayed up late doing math so he could sleep without worrying. But I didn't move, because anger doesn't always make you loud. Sometimes it makes you still. Ryan kept talking. He talked about ambition, about wanting to feel challenged, about needing someone who pushed him instead of just keeping things comfortable. He said my name once, lightly, like punctuation. "She's just there," he said. "She exists." Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not visibly, but clean through. I had existed for him for 9 years, existed when his commissions dipped and his confidence followed, existed when plans fell through and excuses piled up, existed when he needed reassurance, when he needed stability, when he needed someone to believe in him without asking for anything back. And now that existence was the problem. The anger came in waves after that, not hot and reckless, but cold and focused. It rewound moments I'd dismissed for years and replayed them with a clarity that made my teeth clench. The times he compared me to other people's partners, the way he'd laugh when I talked about saving or planning, the way responsible had turned into a warning label. I wasn't angry because he wasn't unhappy. I was angry because he never told me, because he vented to rooms full of people while sharing a bed with me, because he let me believe we were building something together while he quietly decided I was something he'd settled for. That's not conflict. That's cowardice. I realized then that this wasn't about love fading. Love changes, that happens. This was about respect being eroded behind my back, piece by piece, while I kept showing up like nothing was wrong. And the unfairness of it, the sheer imbalance, made my hands curl into fists. He got to feel bored and restless while living inside the stability I provided. He got to criticize the life he benefited from. He got to define me in ways that made him feel better about his own dissatisfaction. And I got to hear about it by accident. I slipped out of the kitchen without making a sound. I didn't announce myself. I didn't interrupt. I walked past the laughter and the clinking glasses and the familiar faces that suddenly felt like witnesses. Ryan reached out as I passed, his fingers brushing my hip without looking up. That casual touch, that unconscious claim, nearly sent me over the edge. I didn't say goodbye, I didn't explain. I grabbed my keys and stepped into the night air, my pulse pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The cold hit my face and sharpened everything. I stood there for a second, breathing, trying to understand how anger could feel so justified and so isolating at the same time. In the car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, replaying his words until they burned. Efficient system, predictable, just there. I wasn't angry because he didn't see me. I was angry because he did, and decided I wasn't worth valuing anyway. That kind of anger doesn't scream. It hardens. It settles into your bones and tells you the truth you've been avoiding, that staying quiet won't fix this, and staying kind won't either. That what's been taken from you isn't just affection, it's dignity. As I pulled away from the house, my phone buzzed with his name, once, then again. I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear his confusion. I'd already heard his clarity. For the first time in years, my anger wasn't about proving something to him. It was about recognizing the injustice of what I'd accepted and deciding I wouldn't accept it anymore.
I didn't drive anywhere specific at first. I just let the car move, letting the streetlights blur into one long ribbon of yellow and white. My hands were steady on the wheel, which felt wrong. I kept waiting for the shaking to start, for tears, for something dramatic that would match the weight pressing down on my chest. Nothing came. When I finally pulled over, it was in the parking lot of a closed grocery store. The sign buzzed faintly above me, the automatic doors locked, the place deserted except for my car and the echo of my own breathing. I turned the engine off and sat there in the silence, staring at my reflection in the windshield like I was looking at a stranger. This was the part no one warns you about, the moment after anger, when there's nothing left to hold you up. My phone lit up again on the passenger seat. Ryan. Then a text. "Where did you go? People are asking about you." Another one followed almost immediately. "Are you okay?" I laughed once, short and sharp. The sound surprising even me. He was asking if I was okay, while the words he'd spoken an hour earlier replayed in my head like a loop I couldn't stop. I typed back,
I'm fine, needed some air, don't wait up. Then I turned the phone face down. For a long time, I just sat there. The anger from earlier drained out of me, leaving something heavier behind. Questions crept in, soft and relentless. How long had he been thinking this? How many conversations like that had happened when I wasn't nearby? How many times had I smiled at people who already knew he'd checked out? The thought that hurt the most wasn't the insult itself. It was the realization that I'd been living inside a story that had already ended for him, while I was still playing my part like it mattered. Eventually, I drove to my brother's place across town. I had a key. He wasn't home yet. I let myself in quietly, turned on a single lamp, and sat on his couch with my coat still on, like I might leave again any second. The room smelled faintly like laundry detergent and old coffee. Normal. Safe. I pressed my palms into my knees and felt the weight of everything I hadn't said, everything I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. This was the moment I expected to cry. Instead, I felt hollow. Not numb exactly, more like the floor had dropped out beneath my life and I was suspended in midair waiting to land. My mind replayed years in fast, jagged cuts, dinners, holidays, conversations where I'd chosen calm over honesty, peace over friction. I'd told myself I was being mature, understanding. Now it felt like I'd been erasing myself one concession at a time. I realized then how tired I was, not physically, emotionally. Tired of being the reasonable one, the one who adjusted, the one who made things work while silently absorbing the cost. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again, a longer message this time. Tess, sorry, Emily, you just disappeared. That wasn't cool. We should talk. That was it. No apology, no recognition, just irritation wrapped in concern. I set the phone down without replying and leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun lazily overhead. The quiet felt heavy, but it also felt honest. For the first time that night, nothing was being asked of me, and that's when the despair finally settled in, not as panic, but as clarity. I wasn't devastated because I might lose him. I was devastated because I finally understood how alone I'd been with him. By the time I lay down on the guest bed in my brother's spare room, dawn was already hinting at the edges of the windows. I slept, but it wasn't rest. It was collapse, the kind your body cakes when it realizes it's been holding itself together for far too long. When I woke up, the world felt unfamiliar. Not broken, just rearranged enough that I couldn't pretend nothing had changed. And somewhere in that quiet, painful stillness, a single thought took shape, small but unmistakable. I couldn't go back to the version of my life where I accepted this.
I woke up before the sun. For a few seconds, I didn't remember where I was. The ceiling wasn't familiar, the room smelled different. Then the night before slid back into place. The kitchen, the archway, Ryan's voice explaining me away like a problem he'd already solved. My chest tightened, but something else was there too. Not anger, not grief, focus. I sat up slowly, listening to the quiet of my brother's apartment. No one needed anything from me. No one was waiting for me to smooth things over or make a decision easier. The silence felt strange, but it also felt like space. Space I hadn't had in years. That was when my habits kicked in. When my world feels unstable, I organize. When emotions blur the edges, I look for structure. It's how I've always survived uncertainty, by turning it into something I can understand. I grabbed my laptop and a legal pad from my bag and sat at the small kitchen table. The glow of the screen felt harsh in the early morning dark, but grounding. On the first page of the pad, I wrote 2 words I hadn't let myself say out loud yet: leave or stay. I stared at them for a long time. I didn't circle one, I didn't underline anything. I just let the question exist without answering it immediately. For once, I didn't rush myself toward resolution. Instead, I asked a different question. If I leave, what does that actually mean? I started listing facts, not feelings.
Facts didn't argue back. The house, co-owned, 4 years in. The mortgage, joint responsibility. Accounts, mostly separate, a few shared utilities. No kids, no marriage, no legal entanglements beyond property and logistics. Seeing it written down did something unexpected. It steadied me. This wasn't a cliff, it was a process. Complicated, yes. Painful, definitely. But not impossible. I wasn't trapped. I'd just been acting like I was. Around mid-morning, my brother wandered into the kitchen, hair sticking up, mug in hand. He stopped when he saw me surrounded by papers. "You're up early," he said carefully. "I couldn't sleep anymore," I replied. My voice sounded even. That surprised me. He nodded, reading the room without pushing. "You want coffee?" "Please." He poured it and set the mug beside me without comment. After a moment, he asked, "You okay?" I considered the question. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I'm thinking clearly. That feels new." He smiled faintly. That's usually the turning point. After he left for work, I did something I'd been circling for hours. I opened my browser and typed in a search I never thought I'd need. Property separation attorney, co-owned house, Ohio. It felt dramatic, heavy, like crossing a line you can't uncross. But I also knew myself. If I didn't at least understand my options, I'd stay stuck in the space between doubt and denial, hoping clarity would magically appear. It never does. I read quietly, methodically. I bookmarked articles, I skimmed forums. I looked for plain language, not scare tactics. Eventually, one name kept appearing, an attorney a colleague had mentioned years ago after her own breakup. I hovered over the phone number longer than I want to admit. Then I called. The receptionist's voice was calm, professional. I explained, in careful terms, that I shared property with a long-term partner and was considering separation. She didn't react, she didn't judge. She simply said, "We can help you understand your options." Those words loosened something in my chest. We scheduled a consultation for the following week. When I hung up, my hands were shaking just enough to notice, not from fear, from the realization that I had just taken the first step out of the fog. Ryan called twice that afternoon. I let it ring. When he texted, "Can we please talk? I don't know what's happening," I stared at the screen and felt detached. Not cruel, just clear. I typed back, "I need space. I'll talk when I'm ready." That was it. No explanation, no apology, no defense. For the first time in years, I wasn't managing his emotions alongside my own. That night, lying in the guest bed again, I felt something I hadn't expected this early in the process. Hope. Not the kind that promises reconciliation, the quieter kind, the kind that whispers, "You can choose yourself now." And once that thought took hold, it didn't let go. I went back to the house on a Wednesday morning. I chose the time carefully, not because I was afraid of Ryan, but because I didn't want an audience. No neighbors watering lawns, no friends dropping by, just the truth, in daylight, without witnesses to distort it later. His car was already in the driveway. For a moment, my pulse ticked up. Not panic, anticipation. The door was unlocked, the way it always was. Ryan trusted the world to be kind to him. I stepped inside and paused, letting the familiar space register without nostalgia taking over. He was in the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it had personally betrayed him. "Emily," he said when he looked up. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "Can we talk?" "We can," I said, setting my keys down. "But I'm not here to be convinced." That landed. I could tell by the way his shoulders tensed. He started fast, like someone afraid of losing momentum. "I didn't mean what you heard. I was venting. I was frustrated. I wasn't thinking." "You were thinking," I said calmly. "You just didn't think I'd hear it." He winced. "I didn't think you were close enough." I met his eyes. "That's the problem." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once, then turning back to me. "Look, I've been under a lot of pressure. Everyone around me is moving forward, buying bigger houses, getting promoted, and I felt," he swallowed, "I felt behind." I waited. Silence has a way of encouraging honesty when you don't rush to fill it.
So instead of dealing with that, I blamed you because you're stable, because everything works with you. And that made me feel small. There it was, the confession he probably thought would fix things. It didn't. You didn't resent the situation, I said evenly. You resented me. No, he said quickly, never you. You told people you settled. You told them you needed a real woman. You said I was predictable, comfortable, just there. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I didn't mean it like that. But you meant it enough to keep saying it. For months. That's when his voice cracked. I can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can take a trip. I don't need a trip. I need respect, and you don't give that to me. The room went quiet. Not awkward, heavy. He sat down hard, like his legs had given out. Please don't do this, he said, looking up at me. Don't throw us away. I took a breath. I'm not throwing us away. You did that when you decided I was something you could complain about instead of communicate with. His eyes filled. I love you. Maybe, but you love what I do for you more. That hurt him. I could see it. And for the first time, I didn't soften the truth to protect him from discomfort. I met with an attorney. His head snapped up. You what? I needed to understand how to separate the house and finances, what walking away actually looks like. You talked to everyone but me for half a year. He stared at me like the consequences were finally catching up. So this is it? Yes, it is. He leaned back, defeated. I never thought you'd leave. That's why I have to, I replied. I told him the plan. Sell the house, split the equity, close the shared accounts. No theatrics, no revenge, just clean lines and final decisions, the kind that don't leave room for misinterpretation. He didn't yell, he didn't bargain anymore, he just nodded, slowly, like someone absorbing a loss they'd underestimated. When I went to pack my things, the satisfaction surprised me. Not joy, release. Moving through the house felt like walking through a museum of a life I used to maintain. I noticed how much of it was mine all along. The routines, the care, the invisible work. I wasn't leaving a shared life. I was leaving a burden. At the door, I turned back once. Ryan hadn't moved from the couch. He looked smaller there, stripped of charm and certainty. You'll be okay, he said quietly. I nodded. So will you, eventually. And then I left, not with a slam, but with a calm that felt earned. The satisfaction didn't come from watching him fall apart. It came from choosing not to hold him together anymore. The weeks after I left didn't feel dramatic. There were no late-night sobbing phone calls, no public scenes, no sudden reversals. Life simply shifted, quietly, permanently. The house sold faster than I expected. Neutral walls do that. We signed the paperwork separately. No small talk, no nostalgia, just signatures and polite distance. When I walked out of the title office with my copy of the documents tucked under my arm, I felt something close to nothing. And for the first time, that felt like relief. People started telling me things once it was officially over. A coworker admitted Ryan had a habit of talking over me in subtle ways. A mutual friend said she'd always felt I carried more than my share of the emotional load. Someone else joked that I'd been the backbone, then stopped mid-sentence when she realized how that sounded. I listened. I didn't argue. I didn't defend him. I didn't need to anymore. A few months later, I ran into someone who knew him well. She hesitated before speaking, then said, "He's not doing great." I nodded, not out of satisfaction, not out of guilt, just acknowledgement. His struggle wasn't my responsibility. It never should have been. What surprised me most wasn't how much lighter my life became. It was how clearly I could see myself once I stopped shrinking. In reflections, in quiet moments, in the way my shoulders no longer tensed when I spoke. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I finally understood something I'd ignored for years. Being someone's safe option means they never expect you to walk away. And that's the danger.
If I'd stayed, I might have built a future on a foundation already cracked. I might have spent years trying to earn respect from someone who handed it out everywhere except home. I might have mistaken silence for strength and patience for love. I didn't lose him. I found myself. So if you're listening to this and something feels familiar, if you're the one holding everything together while being quietly resented, hear this. You don't have to be louder. You don't have to be harder. You don't have to become someone else to deserve respect. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fixing what's broken. It's walking away from the place where you were never truly seen and choosing yourself, finally.